Welcome everyone, my name is Martin and I'm going to do the Photoshop selections presentation. Again, I try to fit as much as possible in a short 1 hour presentation, and selections is a huge topic, so I try to focus on a specific part of selections which can actually be applied after that to anything. So I chose people, selecting people as a topic because probably that's the most common selection that you will have to do. And selecting people can be quite challenging depending on you are selecting a portrait or a full body image. Of course, there's another cute little image there just to see what happens when you have complicated edges all around. One of the first things that you need to know about selections, whenever you make selections, is how we deal with different type of edges. Because whatever you need to select, even if you have a very simple white background, you will always find that the hard edges are easier to select and soft edges are the difficult ones. What are soft edges? Well, they are hair, fur, anything which has tiny little details on it. For example, in this case, this area is obviously the soft edge area, while all around the body would be the hard edge detail. Now, this applies to anything really, whatever you want to make selections of. So, for example, here again, around the hair, that's what I would consider as the soft edge selection, and this is all hard edge. But then there's also another type, which I consider as the third type of selection, when you have transparency. Now that also makes things difficult because that's somewhere in between the two. It can be hard edge, but the main issue with it is it's transparent. So we want to maintain the dress, but we want to make sure we remove any color which was there behind it, either on the floor or on the background. So that can also cause difficulties when you make selections and you want to make them correctly. And then there are things which can help your selections, like focus or depth of field. In photographs, when you have blurred background and you have your image in focus, that can actually help a lot to make the selection. Even though that the background is quite busy in this case, it's actually very simple to do a selection like this, thanks to the shallow depth of field that we have on the photographs. And then there is another thing which can help us whenever we make selections, in case you have a strong contrast from the background. So for example, with this image here, we have a very strong contrast from the background, so the colors and the intensity of the details and the brightness of them is also very different from the background. We have a quite bright background, and the foreground, whatever we want to select, is much darker and different in color as well. So contrast and focus helps us. What makes our work more difficult is soft edges and transparency. So you can see there are several examples here of selections when the background is busy. So what do we do in these cases? We have also examples when we just have a portrait, and then how do we make the selection there? Then we have another one where we have again hair in the image, but also other hard edge details. And then we have also an example which is one of the most difficult things to do when you have a very strong color in the background and you have lots of soft edge detail, because those colors from the background will actually stay on the soft edges, and to get rid of them it's very difficult, especially if you have these very thin lines as well, those whiskers. So I will try to fit everything into this presentation, what I just went through now. And hopefully I will have time for everything. So, yeah, and there's one last thing I didn't mention in the beginning. Another thing, even if you have a white background, what you also should make sure when you make selections is to maintain or preserve the original shadows. If there's any cast shadow, you want to keep them. You don't want to extract this person with that cushion and get rid of completely the shadows. You want to do something like this where you can replace the background color after you made your selection, or put this anywhere else in an environment and still have the original shadows. Okay, that's again another thing, another area which you have to pay close attention to. Okay, so to start off with, let me show you a cool feature which was introduced in the actual latest version of Photoshop. in the Photoshop CC 2014. It's called focus area. So I don't even have to do any pre-selection. I go straight into the select menu, and there is the focus area option. Now, if you are a Creative Cloud member, how many of you are on CC? Okay, cool. Have you already upgraded? How many people upgraded already to CC 2014? Cool. Yeah, it makes sense. If you are a member, you should update to these new features. So you have already access to this one. It's not a game changer, so you can actually replace this if you don't have CC 2014. You can do this other way as well. But it's actually quite nice the way it works, so it's definitely worth giving it a try. Especially if you have shallow depth of field in a photograph. Now this is quite high resolution image. It's probably around 12, maybe more, 15 megapixel image. So that's how long it took for making the selection, or like giving us a preview of a selection. But you can see it's not perfect. First of all, what we can notice is that it kept the ground visible, mainly because that's also in focus. If you think about it, the focus works in like depth, so whatever is close to us is in focus. So even though there's not much detail on the ground, it still managed to find that that is actually in focus. So it's quite smart that even a very flat detail without any contrast, it managed to find that that is in focus, so I might want to keep that. But what if I don't want to use that? Well, all I need to do is to use these two brushes, the plus and minus. If I choose the minus brush, I can draw over this part here. And you can see I just very briefly draw over that part, and it removes it quite quickly. So it even keeps the shadow here on that leg. It's quite nice. This one, it made a bit of a mistake there. And of course, we miss a bit from the arm there. So if I want to add some details, I just switch to the plus, and then I just draw over these parts here. It should be able to fill that in. And then I can try, let's see if it can extend this part here. We lost a little bit of the foot, and you see, it's perfect. So just very briefly touch up on some parts which was a problem. And now we have a perfect selection. So to be honest, when you have focus helping you, this feature is probably the best to choose. Even if you have a very busy background, thanks to the blur in the background or the depth of field, it works really well. Plus, with the in-focus range, you can control the focus as well. So how much you want to select from the focus. If you increase that, that means it will select more from the blur background as well. So it will widen the selection area. And then you even have advanced selection options with the noise in case the image has noise. The noise can be a problem because even though you have like a blurred background, if the image is noisy, that noise can confuse Photoshop, and it might think actually that might be in focus because there's lots of little dots. So in case the image is very noisy, increase the image noise level, and then it won't be confused. So then it knows, okay, it's a noisy image, so I don't have to deal with the noise. I just have to focus on anything else apart from that. Soften Edge can help to soften out the edges, but let's have a look at the edges here. I think it's quite good already, but on the top of the hair I can see that it can be improved a bit. Let's see what happens if I tick Soften Edges, concentrate on the top of the hair. It did a nice little adjustment on it. It's hard to see. Did anyone see the difference? So it's just a very tiny difference, but it actually helps. Also, look at the nose and the face, the silhouette. There also, it just smooths it out a little bit, so it looks much more realistic and a bit better. Now,
it soften the edges all around?
All around, but it pays more attention on the soft edges, so it tries to make them even more softer. And the hard edges will be just cleaned up a bit more. Now, never be fooled by the automatic selections, because if you don't go around all the edges, you won't notice things like this. Like just there is a little bit of a problem. And if I save this as a selection, so I output it to a selection, that's fine, but maybe then I would just press backspace and then delete whatever is in the background, or cut this out and put it somewhere else. Well, that's the destructive way of doing things in Photoshop. That's what you should avoid. What you should do is always work non-destructively. So instead of doing a selection, what you should do after this is choose layer mask. Okay, so output this selection into a layer mask. And refine edge is actually another selection technique which I will show you, but it can be combined with the focus area as well. For now, let me just click on OK, but before I click on OK, I also want to point out that you also have different view options here, and these view options even have keyboard shortcuts. So like between white and black, I can switch easily with W and B, and I can also see the transparency with L, or K will show us the mask view. So let's try this out. B will show us black, and we can see it's not perfect. On white it looked better. Then what was the other ones? K will show us the mask view, and then L is on transparency. So if I click on OK, it's actually going to be like that, because we have the mask created and we have the transparency. What I usually do after this point is to create a new layer. If you click on this icon here, it automatically creates a new layer above your currently selected layer. If you want to do it automatically below it, because you want to put another background behind it, then you should hold down Control or Command while you click on that icon. That creates the new layer directly below whatever is selected. And then, to select a color very quickly in Photoshop, I actually use a shortcut as well. Control Alt Command on Mac, or Alt Shift right click on PC, Alt Shift right click, or Control Alt Command click on PC or Mac, sorry, and that will give you this quick color selector. So let's say I select a color, that one, and that is now my foreground color. If I want to quickly fill this empty layer with that color, all I need to do is press Alt Backspace. Alt Backspace fills with the foreground color. Command or Control Backspace fills with background color. So that's a very quick way to do that. And now we can see exactly what happened there and how our selection looks like. After this point would be the refinement of our selection. And there are several tools that you can use for refinement, but I'm going to actually show that in another example. So in this example, I only wanted to show you how focus area can be used to start off your selection. That's another thing you should know about Photoshop, that there's no selection method which will be good for everything. You have to combine selection techniques, and there is a combination which I use most of the time. That's what we can call the holy grail of selections in Photoshop, which is really like 85–90% of the time will work. So let me show you that now. And then we can look at more specific ones again where it might not work. So I am going to show you probably, let's just have a look, probably with this image here. Because here we have quite a lot of things going on. We have text in the background. The background itself is quite simple. It's one color and it's also a bit blurred out. But then we have also sharp edges, like this guy here doesn't have much hair to worry about. I mean, we don't have, it's hard edge, not soft edge. While she has quite a lot of nice curly hair, which is quite tough to select. So what we are going to do here is a combination of selections, selection techniques. Now, you either use color range to start off most of the time, or you use the focus area, whichever works better. And that's why they are put together here as well. They are quite similar in a sense. Let me show you what happens if I use color range. So with color range, we can click on an area in the background, and that is going to select all those colors in the whole image. You can see that it picks up that color and selects all those colors in the image. What I'm looking at here is to make sure that I can separate the background from the foreground. So there is a fuzziness option which can increase or decrease the selection. And yeah, don't be scared. She looks a bit scary there. We can see that when I increase the fuzziness or decrease the fuzziness, that includes more colors or reduces the amount of colors selected. So white is selected, black is hidden, that's all, deselected. That's the way this view works. And by the way, whenever you first time come into color range, this is what you will see. You will only see the selection preview here in the color range window But to be able to see it in big, which I prefer, you have to change the selection preview to grayscale. That's when you see it there in big. And I actually want to see the image in small here. So that's where I can see exactly what's on the image, but I want to see my selection previewed in big. That's a much better way to work. Now, when I want to add to a selection, I can shift click on the image or here on the selection preview, and that will keep on adding to my selection. Even after you edit details, you can still remove or add more details to a selection. Okay, and you can see that we quite nicely selected whatever was in the background. And I intentionally don't worry about the text in this case, because if I add those as well, that will add a shirt as well, and this vest, because it's the same color as the background, it's white, in the text in the background. So I'm not worried about the text, we can deal with that separately. So color range does quite a good job of finding the edges. You can see around the hair, well, it needs improvement of course, but it did quite a good job of finding the edges. And all around the image, well, it's sort of found the edges all around it. Now, even if you have something like this and you click on OK, you can then turn this into a mask. So we can choose select and then choose inverse first of all, because we have to invert our selection because we want to keep the people selected and not the background. It was just easier to select the background first of all. So now that we have the people selected, I click on creating the mask. Again, you click on this little icon here, close to the new layer icon. That's the one with the rectangle and the hole inside it. That's going to create a mask from the selection. Now, of course, it doesn't look good at the moment. Let me again put a color behind this. So I'm just going to use a different color, something completely different to how it looked before. So just we can see. This is useful because I can see that like him is now a bit transparent, so we have to definitely go over that part there. And we have a couple of unnecessary details. After this point, the easiest way to improve your selection is to Alt-click, hold down Alt, and click on the mask itself. That black and white little rectangle there, that's the mask. Just going to increase my thumbnail size so you can see it better. So that black and white thing is the mask itself. If you Alt-click on it, it gives you the mask view. Okay? Now, there are several ways to improve the mask after this. You either just use the brush tool and draw over things with black and white. So it's obvious what I need to do. I need to increase, have this all in white. Remember, white shows, black hides. That's the way masking works. So if I draw over these details here, they will be not transparent anymore. Not see-through anymore, but filled in completely. And around the edges, sometimes I actually prefer to use the dodge and burn tools, because the dodge tool can brighten up details and the burn tool can darken details. So if I choose the dodge tool and I have the range set to midtones, we can try with that first. I can draw over these and see if anything happens. You can see it starts to get rid of it, but without doing anything with the black background. See how nicely it works on it. So I'm actually improving the edges, and I can do the same thing here, maybe even increase the exposure, which will make it much stronger. I can go over a couple of times, and it improves it without ruining the edges, right? If I increase this to highlights, it might even work better. Look, with highlights, it's even faster and more intense. So again, the background won't be affected. I can just go over these details and it brightens them up. Do the same thing here. Look how quick it will be. And done. So I don't have to really follow the edges because I'm using the dodge on the mask. So it's not affecting the image. I'm not brightening the details on the image. I'm just brightening the details on my mask, in which white shows black hides. So I just need to separate these two parts. And dodge and burn is not a conventional tool. I actually haven't seen anyone else apart from me using this. But as you can see, it works really well. Now, again, here I would be able to do the same thing, but in some cases it's still better to use the brush tool when you have a couple of little leftovers like these to go over them and just improve them. Now, I haven't used the pen tool yet, but the pen tool is also a very useful selection tool, and I know a lot of people would swear that that's the best way to do always selections, and it's true that it's a very precise selection tool, but it's not fast enough. And I've worked in very fast-paced design agencies where there was just no time to do long and precise selection techniques, so that's why I had to come up with a way to like very quickly do things. And if you have the same thing and time is precious, which is almost everywhere precious, then this is probably faster, and then you can still use the pen tool to improve some parts which you can't do with anything else. But you can see I've done almost everything now, and it looks quite good. Maybe here, just draw over a little bit there. So let's have a look at now the selection. Alt click and back and forth. It looks quite nice all around. Now I can do this very quickly here. This part I can just draw over with black, so black hides. I don't even have to do anything, and I just show on this little part here how I would use the pen tool. If you want to quickly check the original image without any masking, just shift click on the mask. Shift click will show you the original details. Okay, so there I can see the original details. Yeah, it's fine. Now I'm going to use the pen tool. I press P on the keyboard, and with pen tool you can really nicely follow edges. Like this one here, I'm in hard edges. I can create a Bezier curve to follow this edge, and if you're not familiar with the pen tool, that's a whole separate topic to learn about, because it can be a bit tricky to learn, but you can see how nicely I can follow it. If you have practice in it, it's actually a very useful tool. So I made my selection. I mean, it's the path at the moment. I selected the details which I don't need. And then if I want to turn this into a selection, I just have to press Command Enter or Control Enter on PC, and it turns your path into a selection quickly. The reason why that's good, because now I'm still on the mask and I can just use the black brush, and look, I can draw over that and it won't affect anything else outside of it. Plus, I can invert this quickly, select, inverse, and I can draw over this with white. So it was good in both directions. But did that make sense? Yeah? So selections are sort of like a mask, temporarily helping you to concentrate on specific parts. And when you have complicated or like complex or difficult selections or edges, then you separate what you want and what you don't want. And by inversing the selection, you can do both sides. You can get rid of what you don't need and improve the other side which you need. So that's again just like a combination of the tools already that we are using together. So just to go through so far what we did, we started off with color range to get rid of most of the background, the majority of the background. Then we used the brush tool to improve the mask and the dodge tool, or it can be also the burn tool, depending whichever is needed. Plus, then we also use the pen tool to make a selection on that part, but it's still not over yet. I would quickly get rid of the text in the background, so I'm just going to zoom closer on these details here and use the brush tool, drawing over with black. I can get rid of most of this very quickly, and I just try to be careful around her hair, so I don't want to lose details from that. But I'm not worried about that, because again that will be dealt with in a different technique. So I just draw over this quickly, something like that, and maybe get rid of that there just a little bit further. Okay, so you can see with the brush tool it's actually really fast and easy to do or improve selections. And we can again shift click on the actual mask to see before and after and check if we lost any details that should be there. So I always check, because sometimes fingers can be lost, or someone's head can be lost in the selection. So it's always good to check, double check with this technique. Like I can see already some details which can be a problem, but it's actually did quite a good selection there, the color range. And of course the edges are not perfect, so you can see like here we can still see a bit of the original color on her skin. Also here we can see those colors. So what can we do with them? Well, what you can do is double clicking on the mask. Double click on the mask will bring up the properties panel, and in the properties panel there is the option called mask edge, which is the same as the refine edge, which we had earlier on in the focus area. Now, mask edge is always there to improve your mask, so it's concentrating on the edges of your mask, as the name says. So if I click on that, I can refine the edges of my mask. So again, it's completely non-destructive. It's something you can change later on as well. But what you need in the refined mask is, first of all, most of the time, smart radius turned on, and increase the radius. First, probably around 2 pixels most of the time should be enough. And look at the improvement. If you press P in here, that will show you before and after. So you can see already that it improved quite a lot. So that was before, and this is after. But what we can do, is it visible on the screen, the difference? Yeah? So it's just a tiny little 1 or 2 pixels which will be removed, which is not needed, and softened out as well, I mean, in a good way. But if we increase the radius even higher, in some cases it can help, in some cases it won't help. You can see around the arm, it's actually getting even better, but it might be a little bit too much around other edges. Let's have a look at now, before and after. So you can see it took even more out of it, and it actually did quite a good job here on this area. But let's have a look at somewhere else. Around the hair also, look at the difference before and after. So this higher smart radius is usually good on soft edges, even more. So higher radius is great for soft edges, but not as good on hard edges. But in this case, I think we actually did a good job on the selection. But you can see this is the original and this is after. Again, how much better that is. Okay, so it actually did a really good job all around the image. Even here, let's have a look at these details. This is what we did with the pen tool. Let's see before and after. Even that is improved, right? Although I did it very precisely, it still wasn't precise enough. It still kept a bit of detail which should be softened out, and it got softer, so it looks much better already. I can even see a bit of the hair on his arm. Look, if I would show it before, it was really ugly, the selection. Now there's like a little tiny bits there which shows the hair on his arm, which is great. The only area so far I see which is a problem is here. Can you see that part? That was before and that is after, right? So that detail there didn't improve, and also his watch has a bit of transparency, and even this detail here. So what do we do in these cases? Well, this is the tool called the Refine Radius tool. And with that, you just draw over the details which you feel like the Refine Mask option like made worse. So look what I'm doing. I'm just going to draw over this here. I want to tell Photoshop that, sorry, but I actually need that detail there. So I want to see that. If it doesn't work, sometimes you need to draw even around it, and even sometimes after this it won't work. So you just have to remember, see, it still keeps it transparent because we have a very high radius. So keep in mind that high radius means, I just show you, that if we turn on the radius, that it considers all this big thick area as an edge. So it looks for the edge in all that big detail. So if you have small details like that small little black part on the glove, then that will be easily lost because it thinks like that's part of the background. Okay, so you have to just keep that in mind. So there can be details which have to be improved. Look at that again. These small portions which will be considered as part of the background. But on the head again, let's have a look at before and after. So much better. Look at the top of the head where we need that just a bit of softness, and then all around it how nicely it removes all the edges. Again, I can see a bit of a problem on the shoulder. Can you see that? Let's see before and after. It becomes a little bit transparent there as well. And on the lashes, let's have a look before and after. That's actually not a problem because you would see through a bit the lashes, so I'm not that worried, but maybe a little bit over the eye it becomes, yeah, here, maybe this part has to be improved, but that was actually already bad in the beginning. So I'm just going to take a closer look at that as well. So it's good to go through quickly all around the edges, and if you are happy about the selection, you just click on OK. By the way, there's so many other options here as well. You can also add a bit of contrast back. I feel like most of the time, if I use a very high radius, I feel like I need a little bit of contrast on the image, so that would just make the edges a little bit more sharper. You can see now that, again, before and after, you can see it got rid of the haziness around the edges, but it still keeps it more strong and firm, so it's not too soft. So a bit of contrast just to like normalize the whole selection. Okay, and actually look, the contrast helped to bring this back, so that detail came back with the contrast, and also his lips are now visible. We lost his lips earlier on, but unfortunately contrast also introduces quite no, it's actually not that bad. Okay, so I was wrong. This detail has to be still improved. That was just the before version. Okay, so I'm just going to click on OK now, and if I all click on the mask, we can see how it looks. So it got so much better around the hair. So look, that was before. It's a big mess. Now it's so much better already around the hair. So what I am going to do is the same thing, using the brush tool and drawing over details which should be white. So I'm just going to draw over these details here which should be white, and then here I need to get rid of that because that was originally part of the background. So what do you think I should use? Which tool to get rid of that? These little details here. Burn, I heard burn, which is the good solution. So we need to burn them out to turn them black. So I'm going to use the burn tool, and it's probably midtones which we need, because if you think about it, these are shadows here, right? The black one with shadows. These are highlights which we want to keep white, and this is roughly midtone, so it's around 50% gray. So that means if we use midtones for the burn tool, it will only burn or make midtone area darker, which is exactly what we need. So keeps highlights still highlights and only affect the midtones. So let's have a look. By using midtones, I draw over it and look at that. So it keeps the white details white, the hair stays there, so it almost like filters out. I can even go in between the hair details and really separate what is part of the hair and what should be part of the background. Okay, so that haziness around the edges can be removed with this technique. And I can have a look at the eyelashes. I can see that it's quite nice, but her eye has to be drawn over. I used the brush tool for that. This one was just a reflection on the eye. Apart from that, it's quite nice. And then this detail, I can easily see in the mask what's wrong with it. So I'm just going to quickly draw over it with white. And these parts as well quickly. Let's have a look. Again, Alt click on this. You can see still I need a bit of refinement there and a bit of refinement here. I shift click on the mask to see before and after. Yeah, it looks fine to me. Let's have a look at this part. Again, I remember which details were bad, so I'm just going to draw over that as well. And in some cases, what I do is just draw over it just quickly so I can see the edges, and then I draw over it again when I see exactly what I need to get rid of. That's the big advantage of using a tablet. You can very precisely draw even with the brush tool. Here again, I just show you quickly the pen tool selection because it's a nice curve. With one curve I can draw this easily, so I can draw around it, something like that. Maybe I can draw another curve there. See how nicely and quickly I can do that. And then I press Command Enter to turn this into a selection, invert the selection, and then use the brush tool and draw over these parts here with white. So I can then have all those completely visible. Right? So that's it for that glove, and I think that's all what we need to do. Again, we can always check the eye area, and I'm not entirely sure what is wrong here, but I think this should be improved just a little bit. Okay, so overall I think we have a really good selection now. Let's have a look before and after. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, this part should be also part of the selection. So you can see the final touch-ups is with the brush tool. And now we only have a problem here around the hair. we still have a bit of details from the background. So we didn't manage to select that. Now what we do in this case? Well, it's sort of a round trip because we go back where we started. Which was the first tool that we used for the selection?
Color range.
Color range, very good. So once you created a selection, you have all this refined selection, you can still go back to selection techniques you used already. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to know really what you need. And what I need by looking at this is to somehow filter out that bright blue color from in between the hair. So what I would do to make sure, because that color is actually very similar to her vest. So if I would apply the color range on the whole image, it will find things that I don't want to deal with. I want to concentrate on this area. So to refine the selection with color range before I actually apply it, I make a selection with the lasso tool, which will tell Photoshop that I'm only concerned about these details here, right? So I can check, yeah, I make sure I don't have the vest selected. So using the lasso tool, I just remove from this selection, and it only has this part which I have problems with selected. Now if you want to go back to color range, you have to double check you are not on the mask, but you should be on the image. Because color range can make selections on the mask based on the black and white differences, but it can also make selections obviously on the image. So double check that in this case, if you go back to color range, select the image again. And once you have the image selected, you can go to select color range, and you will find that it won't deal with anything else around the image, only whatever is there inside that selection. And again, I would choose image here, and I would try to click in that area there where the bright background details are. I can actually see it better here. So I try to click on that, and I try to increase the fuzziness. So I can see it will start to select more of those remaining details, and I can shift click on it just to add a little bit more of that. So I can really refine it and find all those details that still were left over there. So let me have a look. Okay, it's actually not that bad. Let's just click on OK. Right? We have the selection, and then all we need to do is to switch back to the mask and draw over these with black, because black will hide. So I just draw over all those details which I feel like need to be removed. And now it's already much better, but it's still not perfect. So let me have a look. Yeah, that's not that great, but this one got better. So let's see before and after. So definitely, I can't go back that much now, but definitely got better. So what else can we do to improve this selection? There's another technique which can help, because remember I said this, when you have a very strong colored background and you have a soft edge detail like hair in front of a very strong colored background, the edges will always look a little bit similar to the color in the background. It's sort of a chromatic aberration, which is used for something different. It's a technical term about cameras, but it actually stains the edges of the foreground details. So to be able to get rid of the stain, what I usually do is to create a separate layer on top of the image and create a clipping between these two layers. You can use two ways to do that, either Control-Alt-G or Command-Alt-G on Mac. So you can use that shortcut to create the clipping, or you can Alt-click between the two layers. There, on the edge of the two layers, you Alt-click, that creates the clipping. So why do we need to do this? Well, what I'm going to do is use the brush tool, select the color from the hair. So I pick up a roughly same color, like a mid-tone value of the hair color, and change the blend mode. Actually, let me show you first what I'm going to do so it's not that confusing. I'm just going to start drawing over the edges with this color, but you can see it's going to ruin the whole edge because it's completely turning that into one color. So it becomes just simple one color. Instead, what I want is to colorize the image with that color. And to do that, you just change the blend mode of this layer. Here, if you click on normal, you get the blend modes, and you can choose either color or multiply, whichever works better. Usually these two works good. Multiply in this case with this color is not good, so I will just choose color. Let's have a look, before and after on the top. Let me just see, before and after. Here on the top it doesn't change much, but let's go around these details. Can you see the difference? So it's getting rid of that purple detail from these details here at the bottom, and we can see now before and after. So it's a slight adjustment, but it really removes that purple detail from the edges. Yeah, and I can go over there as well. So nicely separated the image from its background. We kept all the little details of the hair, but it's not a very good quality image. I can see it's quite noisy if I zoom close, so we can't expect a better selection than this. But if you look at before and after, you can see how nicely we separated everything using a combination of tools. And this is really the whole point in Photoshop, to combine different selection techniques. So once again, color range in this case, we use color range, brush tool, dodge tool, burn tool, mask edge, pen tool, lasso tool, and we use color range again, and then also we use this brush technique on a separate layer. So that's 8 different ways of making the selection. So if you do this, these combination of tools can be useful in any case really, no matter how complicated your selection is, because once you combine the selection tools, you will be able to get a really good selection at the end. It might take some time, but it's still much faster than doing anything else. Some people would use the pen tool to draw around all the hard edges and then just use like a color range or something like that on the hair. That's definitely much longer than the way we've done it. And just to show you, just to prove the point that I'm going to close this now. Let me just save it. Let's save it here. Just to prove the point that that focus selection technique is quite good. Let me show you on this one. There's not much focus difference between the background and foreground, so let's just test this selection technique. So I always try to check out these new features and see how far I can go with them, but it's actually quite impressive. So instead of color range, I might actually use focus range in the future more, because you will see once it calculates it, it just takes a little bit longer to calculate, but once it calculates, it actually does quite a good job on this image as well. Let's just wait a second. And after this, I'm going to show you the transparency, because it's another difficult thing to deal with. So first, it looks horrible. Obviously, it's not good, but she lost her neck. But what we need to do is to add these details. So using the brush, draw over the details which we need. So obviously, we will need her neck. We will need her arm. So I just draw over that as well. Let's have a look. It should be able to find it quite nicely, yes. And then hold down Alt or switch to the minus. You can hold down Alt as well. Draw over what you don't need. And then it should be able to find it even, yeah, quite nicely. It needs a little bit addition here and there. So you need to fiddle around with it, with this image a bit more, but it actually creates quite nice edges. So if I zoom closer, once we are ready with it, I will show you that it actually was faster than starting with color range. So you can see the edges are quite nice. I mean, it can still be improved with the color range, the mask edge, but it's not that bad. So for a very fast selection, I think it's quite good. So either color range or a focus area can be good to start the selection. Now with transparency, you have again something that you have to learn about. With transparency, what you need to do, and just to show you how I would do this, I will focus on this bottom part here. So I'm going to make a selection with the rectangle marquee, just to focus on that part. I would again start with color range. So select color range, and although she's wearing black and the background is gray, it will still be able to make a difference between these two. So you can see I just clicked a couple of times holding down Shift on the background to separate it from the foreground. Once it got separated, I play with the fuzziness to see if I can improve it or not. Then I click on OK, invert the selection, select inverse, and save this as a mask. So you can see, as I said, I'm going to even crop the top bit, so we don't have to deal with that at all. Obviously, you wouldn't do this normally, but for this example, I just want to concentrate on these details here. You can see now we already have quite a good selection. But then again, exactly what I would do in the other image, I would use the brush tool, quickly draw over parts which I'm sure that there's no transparency here, like on the legs as well. Then when I'm not sure, then I switch back and I can see exactly what I need to do. So again, around the legs, I need to make sure it's not transparent. So we don't want to see through these details. I very quickly draw over them. And then I can see like these parts shouldn't be transparent either. These details, I can see these shouldn't be transparent either. But then I can see the rest should be transparent. But what I can do, for example, on this detail here, look, if I turn it on and off, that should be a little bit more visible because there's enough material of the original cloth. So what I would do is to change the brush, and I just put another color in the background so you can see what's going to happen. I always use very strong different colors to the original background so I can see my selections. So what I would normally do in this case is using still the brush tool, but change the opacity on the top to, let's say, 30%. 30%, and then start drawing over it with white. That introduces a little bit from the original colors. And see, it's still transparent, but now I can see more of it. So wherever I need to see more of it, I just draw over with 30%, and then I can really control how much I want to see of that material. Again, here, between the legs, I draw over with 30%. I can draw over these details as well. Here, again, I can draw over it until I feel like I'm happy with the density of the material. Right? Here as well I can draw over a bit, otherwise it just looks too transparent. But don't get too far when you start seeing the original colors. So this is what you need to do to refine a selection like this with transparency, where you can see already we really nicely got rid of the original colors. So whatever color I use here in the background, I can use hue saturation and I can see it works nicely with everything, and we have the transparency visible as well. Did this make sense? Yeah, cool. Let me show you another quick technique with shadows. I mentioned earlier that you have maybe images where you have the shadows and you want to maintain those shadows. I'm not sure if I have an image here on top of which I can put this, but maybe I will just find something. But for now, I just want to show you what you need with shadows is, again, very simple. And again, I'm just going to concentrate mainly on the shadow area. What you need is, when you have your selection, and I'm just going to use the quick selection tool now, and I'm not worried about details. Holding down Alt, I can add a little bit back of the shoes there. Again, here, add back a bit of the shoes. Quick selection tool is just good to create like a mock-up selection, but it's not good edges. Most of the time it has a lot of problems around the edges, and it's not really refined. But let's just save this. She lost her glasses now, and I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the shadows more, so I'm going to again add that very different color. So you can see with a selection you can easily lose the original shadows, the cast shadows, which can be redrawn manually, but it's much easier to do it from the original image. But how can you bring it back from the original image? Well, what you can do is to make a quick selection with the pen tool around the areas where you see the shadows. So I'm going to switch back here, and I'm going to use the pen tool and make a selection of them. Now, this is again the reason why I use the pen tool, because it can be a very precise way to find exactly where I need these details. But to be honest, you can also use, if you want to be precise, obviously you go through it with the pen tool, but to be honest, you can even use the lasso tool. Let me just check this small detail here for a second, just to see how it looks like. If I delete that and set it, yeah, it's going to work. So what I'm doing here is using the lasso tool, make a selection of the areas where I see shadow, So I'm going to again do the same thing. Here, Shift, make a selection. Holding down Shift, by the way, adds to your selection with the lasso tool. Make a selection there as well. Then again, Shift, selection, this part. I have 5 minutes left. And then I Shift, select this part as well. Okay, so we selected all the details which has shadows. And I select the image and press Command J or Control J on PC to duplicate that on a separate layer. So you can see we have that now on a separate layer. And what I do, and this works mainly when you have a bright background. In other cases you would use different blend mode. But you can see if I change the blend mode of this layer to multiply, then the shadows will blend nicely with whatever color I put behind them or whatever image I put behind them. Of course, these details will change in color as well, but that doesn't matter because as long as I put the image back and put it on top of this, turn my mask back on, then it looks perfect. See? So I have the shadows on a separate layer set to multiply, and I have the image on top of it with the selection around it with the mask. So you have a perfect shadow there, and see if I change the color of the background, it will still work perfectly. Whatever color you use, it will be perfect. Let's say with the blue, it looks really nice. Okay, so and that was a really quick fix because with the lasso tool, you didn't need to really refine the selection. To be honest, it's actually better to do with the lasso, and don't worry about the pen tool. Most of the cases, this will work. Okay, so that's about the shadows. And then quickly, just one last thing I wanted to show you, which is also a very useful technique. Now, actually, two things, if I can fit in two. There is also a way to do multiple masks on the same image in case you have to create different types of selections from the same photo. So this is the original photo. Let me show you the original photo there. The couple standing on the rock. And maybe I was given the task to have two different selections. One, the couple with the rock, and one when we only see the couple. So using the same image, we want to create two different selections, extracting them, but once with the stone and once without the stone. Now for this you don't need to do this job twice. You can do the same thing in the same image, but using two separate masks, but both masks affecting the same layer. The way you can do that, by default, Photoshop only allows you to use one pixel mask per layer, right? But the way you can do several masks is to group your layer, even if it's just one layer. See, this is the only layer inside the group. If you create a layer group, then you can put an additional mask on that group. Then both of the masks will affect the same layer. So look at this. If I turn on this mask, there's the couple with the rock, right? I can have the background color as well there. And if I turn on this mask as well, there's the couple without the rock. So using the same layer, I can have two separate masks, and I can decide whether I need the rock or not, whether I need the background or not. Right? And this can be really useful. Sometimes I have like 5 different masks on the same layer because I want to deal with different parts separately. And that helps you to work. Even if in InDesign, I would still be able to switch between these by just turning layers on and off. And who knows, yes?
So how do you do more than 2?
You would add another group. You press Command G or Control G and then put another mask on that group. And who knows how many subgroups you can create in Photoshop. Because this is 3 groups, group in a group in a group. So what's the limit? How many can we do? Just a guess?
6, 7.
10. So you can have 11 masks on the same layer because you have one on the layer itself plus 10 on the groups, right? So look, group, 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 and that's the limit. It says 9, but that's because the first one I think was 0. Or no, it was called without rocks. So 9 plus that's 10, and that's the 11th. So that's the limit. But whoever gets that far, I would like to see that file because that's probably a very complicated selection. Okay, and then just one last thing about the rabbit. I just would like to point out that in some cases, when you have very difficult selections like this, you will actually have to fake a selection. You can't, sometimes you just can't make a selection, so you will have to fake the selection. And what I did is I set up a brush which simulates hair, and I just drew over the edges. So what you can do, look at this. If I zoom a little bit closer, these details are actually drawn by me. If I turn on, you can see it's not exactly where the original hair ended, right? I just faked that details, and even the whisker I actually faked on a separate layer which I drew with the pen tool. So all this is actually fake, it's not actually the part of the original image. So how did I do this? What you need is to set up a brush, a hair brush, which I'm not sure if I have time to do that now, but once you have a hairbrush, let me check if we have, no, it's not saved here. Let me just try to do this very quickly. So you have to do it on a white layer, use the brush, and then put a couple of dots down. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. So a couple of dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, just completely randomly. Okay, that will be our brush. That simulates the randomness of hair. Then you make a selection of all this and you save it as a brush. So you go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, save it as hair or something. Then you can go to the brush settings, brush panel, reduce the spacing of the brush down to 1%. You can see that already makes it continuous. You turn on shape dynamics, turn off control, pen pressure. You need the tablet. Tablet is much better. With mouse you can also do it, but with a tablet it will be much better. So you can see already, look at that, it looks like hair, just by simply creating that. So now what I can do is simply go on the mask, and I'm just going to completely erase this part and fill it in with white, just to show you how I would have done this. Using black, I'm just going to draw over it like this on the edges to simulate the hair, the randomness of the hair. There, just a couple of times draw over it like that. Then this part here at the bottom, we don't have to worry about that. We can always delete that. So it's like almost like trimming the hair of the fur there. And then what you can do, if you feel like you lost a little bit too much detail, you can always switch to white, maybe even reduce the opacity, and just add a couple of more fur back. So you can see how nice the edges start to look like. Very soft and detailed fur on the edges. I'm only concentrating on the edge. Look at that detail there, how nice and fine it becomes. And then all I need to do is to clean up the edges on the inside again with a normal brush. So I can go back to a normal brush and just draw over this with a full opacity or a soft edge brush, something like that. And then we created a very nice detailed edge. Obviously I would do it even better if I have a bit more time, but it gives you the idea how to do that. Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot. I have one more presentation at 4 about drawing in Illustrator. So if you are interested, you're welcome to come and check that out as well. Thank you.